Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see some Tufts alumni and fellow TLA members. My name is Tom Dunn. I'm an attorney at a law firm in Massachusetts and Rhode Island named Pierce Atwood. I'm also the president of the Tufts Lawyers Association, who's putting on this program today. In 2020, as we all know, it's been quantum change, and it's been a change in every aspect of our life, from our family life, our social life, our careers. And in talking with Ken Priore, who's a board member of the TLA, a lot of our conversations talked about those changes and how he works with his colleagues to deal with those and to navigate those. And we had a TLA event in June. It was called Join the Bar, where we were really doing a program for law students talking about different practice areas. And Amii reached out and explained what her profession is as an executive coach. And we put Amii together with Ken, and they both are in the Bay Area of California, and was thrilled to have this as a program that Ken, as the head of the TLA West Coast steering committee, put on, and looking to really grow our West Coast presence of the TLA. If you didn't know, the Tufts Lawyers Association was formed in 2003. We're a nonprofit, and our mission really is to create a sense of community, to have an area where you can have a network for career development topics like this, for business development topics. If we have referrals or just want to ask a question about an area of the law that you know somebody practices in as a secondary source. We're a non-dues paying organization. So if you graduated law school and you graduated from Tufts, you are a TLA member. And we are a welcoming group. We're looking to expand and try a bunch of new and different things. So please reach out to me. If you're on the West Coast, particularly, please reach out to Ken and volunteer your time or just attend programs like you're doing today. So I'm really, really excited to introduce our speakers for the program today, which is titled The New Normal in Your Legal Career. If you're not in the legal industry, that's okay. This is going to apply to you. We made it for the legal career because Tufts Lawyers Association at least went to law school, although not all of us still practice law. So I have the great honor of introducing our two panelists here. Amii Barnard-Bahn. I'm going to read their bios because they're so impressive. She's a former Fortune Global 50 executive. Amii Barnard-Bahn, Tufts alumni, 1989, is a consultant to the C-suite and the leaders at global companies like Bank of the West, Adobe, and The Gap. Recognized by Forbes as one of the top coaches for legal and compliance executives, she is a member of the Marshall Goldsmiths 100 Coaches. She guest lectures at Stanford and Berkeley. She's a contributor to the Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and Compliance Week. And she's a fellow of the Harvard Institute of Coaching. She graduated from Georgetown Law and is a member of the California State Bar. And feel free to reach out to Amii to receive her free Promotability Index self-assessment. I'm sure she's going to explain what that is. Ken Priore is the Global Legal Director for Partnership and Procurement at Box, a cloud content management solution company I'm sure you all know in the Bay Area. Ken is a 1991 Tufts alumni, so you guys were at school together at the same time. His career in the Bay Area has run the gamut. He started off at Charles Schwab, handling third-party litigation claims at Schwab. He has founded his own financial company, his own law firm, giving general counsel services to companies. He's worked as general counsel for PayPal, Stock and Option Solutions, Silver Springs Networks, and now Box. And so that is our fabulous speakers. Both truly love this topic of talking about career paths and how you can kind of control your own destiny. And I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from both of you, Ken and Amii. So thank you, and take it away.
Thanks a lot, Tom. One quick clarification, though I would love to say I was general counsel for Box and Silver Spring. I had other roles there, but thank you for the intro. One thing I kind of wanted to set before we kind of jump into the program is a little bit sort of intention and expand a little bit more on like how Amii and I arrived at this program. And you know, as Tom sort of queued up, 2020 has been a ton of change, both sort of at the macro level that's unfolding, that's happened, and for a lot of folks on the personal level. And when Amii and I started this conversation, we realized that in both our sort of own professional careers, our own kind of journeys, like we had kind of an insight into change. And for me, it's been, since I've been fortunate in my career to work with a wide variety of companies, both in terms of size, focus areas, everything from consumers to consumer focus to enterprise, you know, companies that didn't even have office space to you know, 20,000 plus employees. I look at change in a pretty particular way, and I think it's something that might resonate today. And you know, when Amii and I were talking, I realized like she has had such an exposure to professionals who are dealing with change management in their own careers, but really kind of looking at change as something that you can start to sort of look at differently. Where in Amii, I think you can probably speak better about kind of like how you view change. But the thing that we realize is, you know, this could be a interesting topic for the TLA community to have as they sort of either look at the changes that are happening in the world or changes that might have been happening to their professional career, or just on the topic more generally.
Thank you, Ken.
Other thing I kind of want to lay out is you're going to hear probably the word change mentioned a ton of times during this program. So I wouldn't recommend making a drinking game out of it or taking a shot when you hear the word, but it is kind of a theme for everything. You know, when I look at a changing environment and the way that I define that is my scope of my work has changed. My company has changed. I'm not working anymore, and that either was by choice or isn't by choice. For me, one of the first elements I go to is sort of like stop, right? Like there's for me personally, there's always, I can have a lot of emotional reaction to it. And, you know, I think having that lens to recognize about how you're looking at the change is kind of the first step in trying to say what you should do about the change, if anything. Right? Some changes you can kind of ride through and say like, okay, things are changing around me. Maybe I don't need to do anything. But if you don't stop and take that sort of assessment, then you're not going to be in a place to react. And it really comes down to like, what is your mindset going into it? Are you nervous about the change? Did you freeze? That tends to be through my history has been some of my default reaction, whereas I have froze kind of and not reacted to the change. And that sometimes can be the right action, but not always. Amii, I assume with a lot of executives, you probably see a range of responses to change. What's your kind of insight on what that first step should be?
Yeah, I think that some people are excited by change, right? It can be exhilarating. So some changes are wonderful, like a promotion can be wonderful. It can also be scary, actually. So our reactions can be very different to the same set of circumstances. Many of my most clients in most industries are hurting right now, but some are actually thriving. Particularly some of my clients in ed tech that already had virtual platforms, things like Zoom. You know, you can imagine they're having their challenges with change are around scaling in an environment where global supply chain is impacted and where they need to rapidly hire, and they're having to figure out, well, how do we test people for culture and fit when we can't meet them and they can't be in our office? That's a big one. I had a friend that I was coaching who, she's a general counsel of a healthcare company, and they had to hire their CEO virtually. Companies that went kicking and screaming and for years rejected workplace flexibility or work from home and are now being forced to adopt it. So there's systemic change on a large policy level that I think we're all going through. And then there's the individual change of everything from, do I have a job, to am I meeting my team's needs? How do I know that they're okay? How do I know when we're getting work done? So there's a lot of work that I do with teams around both taking care of people as people, which is a boundary that I think we protected heavily, especially having been an employment lawyer first. There are very good reasons for having boundaries between professional and personal. Those are getting challenged right now. I did a keynote for the California Chamber of Commerce for all of their heads of HR, and I have tremendous empathy for them because the number of employee relations complaints at some companies has actually skyrocketed, and for others it's disappeared, and they worry that people are so afraid of their jobs that they're not talking and speaking up anymore when there is a problem. Under challenge and stress, a lot of people's difficult derailers as leaders can show up. So other things that I see are if you're a perfectionist and you tend to micromanage under stress, you might be doing that a lot more right now, especially because you can't see and feel your employees' work, and you can't just drop by their desk and see how they're doing and check in on that project. You have to literally schedule time with them or Slack with them or whatever your platform is. And people have to really be aware of their proclivities under stress and challenge. We've all got something that we do that's usually not in our own best interest or our team's best interest under stress and challenge. So the number one thing that I do is help people become aware of what that is, because once you're aware of it, then you can work on it. All great leaders have derailers. Alan Mulally, who was the former head of Boeing and turned around Ford. Some of you may know him. He's a fantastic leader. And I love when I get to talk to Alan because he has lots of derailers, but he knows what they are. Right. And he has actively worked on not having any blind spots and knowing there are different tells that you can have about yourself that you can become aware of. For some, it can be you get a slight like ping in your head. For some, it's like a feeling in your chest starts rising up if you're going to lose your temper. Everyone's got, or some people get really quiet and they shut down. So if you know what your tell is, then you can be like, oh, to your point earlier, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think about what's happening now. What's going on with me right now? And what choice do I know what I tend to do that doesn't always serve me or the situation and the outcome that I want in a business context. So what are my choices? And if you learn that ability to choose, it's very, very powerful. And so that's what I would share that the best leaders do is they know what their derailers are. They know when they get triggered. And it happens a lot right now in ambiguity, in crisis, in stress. There's a lot of reasons for people to be concerned and to have stress right now. And so just, I think, thinking through that, not judging, but just being aware and then picking things to work on and mitigation strategies is super helpful.
What I loved about how you kind of framed that was, one, you reminded me that like change can also, like I automatically go to change is something bad happened, right? But change can also be something good. Yeah. And I think back to what you said, like when I've taken on new teams or I've taken on new roles, it actually has a very similar feeling because it's suddenly like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, or right. I don't know what to do next. The other thing that you said that was really interesting was, and I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate and go, if your organization is facing change and you don't think that you need to do anything different, or you haven't felt that you need to do anything different, I would kind of make the argument of challenge that. And it goes the same idea of, if the business that I'm in is changing, or the firm that I'm working for is changing, or these market structures are changing, it's a great time to kind of make that assessment of like, wait, where am I relative to the change that's happening? Because maybe you don't feel it, right? Maybe you don't perceive it, or it hasn't hit you right now, but it's there, right? And it part of goes into kind of what I think is one of the next points I wanted to bring up, which is no matter where you are in your career, the role that you're in, I've found it very powerful to think of what I'm doing as a business model, my own business model. And I think, Amii, like you probably have worked on this perspective with your clients before, but I don't think that's something as lawyers that we kind of take on as an understanding. We think there's a certain career path, or we think there's a certain way that there is to have a career as a lawyer. And I think about kind of my own career, and it's almost like I go back to when Amy and I were putting this program together. She asked, like, what would be the something you'd want to tell your, your younger self? And I think about, when I started my career in the 90s, I was very focused on the fact that I had a very non-standard path. I went right out of law school to working in-house, and it was only after two different roles that I went back. I went in private practice and working in a law firm, and I carried that around as a bit of a weight, or a bit of sort of questioning about my capabilities. And it was because I yet hadn't learned that there's no one way to solve being a lawyer, to having a career. Partially because in the 90s, it wasn't quite as evident yet as I'd say it is today. But I think it also goes back to the mindset of, like, what are you doing in when you're looking at change, what assessments you're making, and then what is the business of yourself that you're trying to grow?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you're thinking about is what I would call it is strategic thinking, which is one of the 5 elements that I use in the promotability index around why people get promoted and why they get ahead. And I use promotability as really a catchphrase for just continuing to learn, having a growth mindset, as Carol Dweck would say. If some of you have read her wonderful book, Mindset. And strategic thinking applies to both thinking about your company and about your own career. And, where do you want to be in 5 years? Are you gathering the skills you need to get there? Many lawyers are very happy with a linear path. And I think that's what's usually, presented in law school. Either you might go into public interest, you might go to a law firm, you might want a judicial path, you might go into public policy, or you might go into, working for public interest, in prosecution or in criminal defense, that kind of thing, or public defender. But like you, I had a very indirect path. I started as an employment lawyer, worked for a law firm, and then went into HR and took a lateral, actually a big pay cut, took a lateral, and then worked my way up, and then was able to hockey stick later into a variety of executive roles, from corporate compliance officer at US Pharma and McKesson. I had a $90 billion business where I built a compliance program from scratch. So that was a big fun challenge. And then I've also been a chief human resources officer. And then I've also been a CAO overseeing IT and a bunch of other functions for the California Dental Association. So I've always taken chances, and I've always enjoyed continuing to learn. And so one of the things I would say about lawyers that I love, and I coach a lot of them, is that we have the ability to quickly assimilate large amounts of information in really smart ways. And it's not that difficult, I don't think, to flip that to your own career and use that to your advantage. Lawyers, that we're taught so well to analyze a problem, look at things from all sides, find the weaknesses, find the strengths. That's the exact same skill set that you need to make a pivot, to see into the future around how your own career path may be going, and to analyze perhaps what do you enjoy, what brings you joy, what are you good at, what will people pay you for, and finding the intersection of basically those 3, the Venn diagram. You're finding your Venn of that. And similarly, you raised with company thinking. I think that it's really important for companies, and attorneys can show thought leadership in their organizations. To your point, Ken, if you have leaders that are in denial or freezing, you can demonstrate your ability to be a strategic thinker by asking those questions. What problems are customers going to pay you to solve 5 years from now, given the change in circumstances and the things that you can see happening in your industry? And should you be working towards those now? One of my favorite quotes is Wayne Gretzky's, I want to skate to where the hockey puck's going to be. So I really like thinking about that both in terms, I've always thought about that in terms of my career and my company and whoever I'm serving. Now it's individual clients, but when I was in an organization, an executive, it was, thousands of employees, and just thinking about, okay, how am I going to do right by our shareholders, our employees, whether it's in a growth or a decline state or a completely shifting market. And I think one of the biggest changes actually is we got so used to in-house, long range planning. 18 months, 3-year strat plans. And now it's really kind of 6 months. I really am not advising my clients to go longer than 6 months, with some exceptions when you're talking about maybe a major operating, like an OS upgrade, or like getting into a new market or doing an M&A or something like that. So,
and what I'd layer on is even more than I have seen in the past is, I know with my own teams, like we're being driven, we've been asked to sort of have data-driven analysis in areas that typically haven't had them for in-house legal departments. And you know, this becomes this interesting, almost philosophical discussion around how do you quantify risk? What's that intersection with your sourcing and procurement groups, and how do you start to create metrics around that, because the organizations want to track that. One of the tools that I've used to solve that is to not be shy about pulling in concepts that maybe haven't been in legal metrics tracking before. And I know, Amy, we talked about this in the run up to the program, right? I think part of that is, you know, having a liberal arts background and having the type of education that Tufts provided gives us at least a framework that's a little different, right? Or at least has the ability to have a wider aperture to take that risk. You know, and I think, you know, that kind of leads to one of the takeaways that I have for this program, which is, you know, assess yourself and figure out what's your true north. Amy has talked a lot about with her clients how, you know, having that assessment is key for them to have the ability to understand how they're reacting to change. And for myself, it's been, unless I've taken the time to make that assessment, or at least recognizing myself when I'm frozen, I haven't been successful. So I'd say definitely out of the program, that's kind of one of our first key takeaways.
I just want to jump in really quick. One of the questions that I've gotten from TLE members coming into this program has been from in-house counsel. And in particular, some of our members, some of our more active members had been furloughed from their position. And, you know, there's a perception sometimes that in-house counsel positions are cost center. And I'm curious from a I guess, promotability, how do you sell, you know, the services and value that you provide as in-house counsel? And if you're outside counsel and want to go into inside counsel, what are some ideas and strategies that we could do to take that path? If you have any thoughts along those lines.
Yeah, a couple. So on the first part, where you're talking about how do you turn from a cost center to a business strategy, it's a little bit of a repeat, but I'll go back to sort of the data-driven concept. And what I've done internally is to sort of, you know, from the procurement side, it really talks about sort of cost savings and partnering with your sourcing and procurement teams to say, you know, where were those difficult contracts where legal was a partner in those discussions, and what was the amount of money that we saved, and sort of recast a little bit of the work that you're doing as having a direct impact to the bottom line. Now, not everyone's work in-house has that same capability. And so on the partnership side, and so another aspect of what I am responsible for, my teams are responsible for, is business development. It's tying it together on, you know, because of the work that we did, you know, we had these partnerships. And one of the things that I in-house really try to promote my teams to understand is, where is that larger nexus point between what you're doing? Okay, we got this partnership with partner A up and going, but what was the knock-on effect? Like have we thread through like how much additional revenue came in because of that product being out there? Well, why not? Right? Let's tie that story together, because yes, we're not the only reason that revenue came in, but we're part of that story. And it goes to the point of I think one of the points of the question, which could be, is it's about you framing with the leadership kind of what your group is doing, because if you're just seen as we're approving agreements, then you're going to be seen as a little bit of the, you know, the cost center and a little bit of the weight, versus if we're partnering together to do X. The X is cost saving, the X is bringing in revenue. On the second point of your question, or second question there about what's the lens of some folks who are outside counsel trying to come in-house, that, you know, I've been in recently in roles where, you know, we've had tons of applicants, and, you know, other than do you have domain expertise, the next important question is, do you understand the role that you're applying for? And we have a legal intern position that's open today. And, I've gotten more folks coming over the transom, law students who've said like, hey, I'm really interested in this position. Can you tell me more? Like and I'm happy to engage in that conversation. They're going to have a different point of view if they've got the right other chemistry to get in there to get into the interview than other candidates who didn't take that effort. And last point I'll say is, there have been a couple of roles that I've had in my career where I literally cold emailed folks and I went in over the transom without introductions. Don't be afraid to do that. Like, it's not going to work all the time, but you'll be surprised how many times it does.
Yeah, it can be a difficult transition sometimes for from law firm to in-house. The common fail points that I've seen are people who don't just jump in and really have a good first 90 days plan. And it's really, Tom, about building the business relationships. There's KPIs and there's metrics, and for some jobs it can be hard to prove a negative. Litigation and some other things like that. It can be easier to get some numbers. But I'd say when your clients are talking about you and feeling like you're really lockstep in arm in arm with them, and that you get their business and you get how they make money and how they lose money. Attorneys that come in from the outside and ask the right questions and start, really doing a listening tour is what I would call it for the first 90 days are really better equipped to be treated as a full business advisor and partner, as opposed to a cost center approach. I really don't know of any companies that look at their in-house counsel, as a cost center. There's certain business cycles that companies go through where they staff up and then they may need to staff down. The most obvious ones being when there's a merger. There's usually a beauty pageant with general counsels and heads of HR and heads of audit. I've been through, many of those. Fireman's Fund, Allianz, when I was there. Certain positions do become redundant, but I've never, at a large enough company, I've never really seen when there's a good general counsel, when the general counsel does a really good job of having everybody's back and reporting to the board and sharing the guidance and having those business relationships and the reputation, then I don't think that it's seen as a cost center.
Yeah, and I think, Amy, what I'd layer on to that is I think it's I think there are times where if folks in legal don't kind of help frame the conversation and don't reach out and find who their strategic partners are inside the organization, that they have that danger of saying, well, like, where's the value in this organization other than, they're helping us run the business, right? They're clicking the boxes that need to be clicked so we get the revenue because the agreements get signed. And I think there's an argument to be made that being an effective in-house counsel and managing your career and managing yourself as the organization changes is having that wider lens where you say, no, I'm adding strategic value. And I think having those internal partnerships where who those stakeholders are, you're having the conversations with them before there's any change in the organization is something that's key. And it's something that you need to have happen at a regular cadence, even if everything's running sort of smoothly at a given point, because you want to be part of the change. You want to be part of the process as the change is happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something you said that was really key is, I think another difference between law firm and in-house is influence. When you're in a law firm, you're already being hired for your scope of work and you're going to get paid, and the company's already decided they want to do it. In-house, it's a little more fluid, that you don't usually directly get charged for every hour of your time. And so you need to already have earned the right and be front of mind for, say, product development to think of inviting you to the meeting. So one way to test whether you have the right influence that you need is, are you, without you asking, being invited to the right meetings to get in on product development early, to do the risk assessment, to raise compliance or regulatory or ethics concerns, potentially, like with AI or other things that we're getting into, or data privacy. So that's often can be a challenge, especially if some attorneys are less skilled at how they navigate saying no, and guiding something to yes. That is also another area that I find is different, because in a law firm, you often don't know if they took your advice or not. You assume they did because they paid you, but you're gone. Like you're not in the meeting. The biggest shock, I had young attorneys who then come in, they're like, well, they didn't take my advice. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, why not? I'm like, why did they come to me? And it's like, well, we've got to do some influencing here.
Right.
They're still not convinced, and they really want to do what they want to do. And it's a real shock. They're like, but, and I'm like, well, they may not have taken your advice when you were in the law firm either. So try not to take it personally. You just didn't know. Now you know. And so now let's work on influencing. So that's when I've had a team, and I've had, you're mentoring them. And so that's another thing that can come up.
You just sort of triggered this conversation I've had many times, which is as I've been mentoring sort of new team members, I always lay out, like, everyone has a philosophy in-house of how to be successful. And for me, what it's been is making sure I'm in the meetings of which 90% of what is said may not be relevant, but for 10% of it, it really is. And what I mean by that is, especially like on the product and technology development side, I need to have the baseline knowledge so I can speak the language of my developers, of my build team, of my product team, of my marketing team. Like, I should reach out to their language rather than having to come to lawyer speak. But it's also, it becomes a value of, I may not pick up a data point today that is relevant, but often 3 months from now, 6 weeks from now, whatever, there'll be something that was said in that meeting that'll be back there in storage. And to your point is, I think it was really powerful, so I'm going to emphasize it, is I always encourage young sort of colleagues that are earlier in their career to kind of make those relationships and connections, and want the product people should want you in their meeting, not because you're even saying anything, but when it comes to the point where the legal hat is on and not the product hat or not the business hat, that they don't have to explain everything to you because you've already been there and you've already known it and you're seen as a team member. But I do think, and it's a good point to highlight, like, you have to have the ability to know that sometimes things are going to be said in meetings that aren't completely relevant, or you may not agree with, but it's not your role to say so yet, right? You're there sort of as an observer first, and then commentator next when it gets to the next level of an agreement or a product solution.
Yeah.
Amii, I have a question for you. A lot of businesses and companies, large and small, are kind of suffering, because of the economy. But yet some aspects of that company or firm or business is really doing well. And, if your sector, your group is doing really well, how would you recommend, from a kind of executive coaching standpoint, somebody, whether a lawyer or, just a go-getter that's a up and comer for a company, how can they go and seek a raise in a strategic manner in this environment? Or should they really not be doing that in this environment? Do you have any thoughts, and have you counseled, any clients along those lines?
Yeah, I have a video short that is on my YouTube channel around negotiating comp. It wasn't during COVID, but the points are still somewhat similar, and it's also for when you're joining a company. So people are welcome to look at that from Compliance Week conference when we used to do those in person. I would say that the biggest mistake I see with compensation negotiation is that people don't approach it as a conversation. They approach it, they go to battle, especially lawyers, especially if you've litigated, and that's a mistake on lots of levels, especially during a sensitive time like this, where there may be winners and losers in terms of who has money and who doesn't, which businesses are making money and which aren't. So I guess, Tom, it depends on the circumstance, right? But like I have colleagues right now who are being handed entire functions without a raise. They're like, well, we have to cut back. So we're furloughing all these people. And now guess what? You're responsible, on top of marketing. You're now also doing employee communications and DEI. That's a big one. A lot of general counsel are being like, here, we have to do something. So here you go. You are now the diversity and inclusion expert. For CEOs, they weren't expecting to be public health officers deciding on, well, what's safe? Like, how are we going to protect our suppliers? And do we require people? What about our core operating staff? So I hear that a lot from some of my CEO clients is like, oh my God. So long-winded way of saying, if you are accepting a new job, my advice would be very different in negotiating than if you're already in-house, your company's in flux, and you feel that you're, being undercompensated. I would present the data, and again, this is in this video. This 3-minute video I mentioned. Always have your data ready. So get data points. What's the going rate for your job? Have you networked with colleagues that can share this information with you? Have you talked to recruiters who can give you a range for that job, for your job or the job you want, in your geography and in your range? Have that data. That's what's helped me whenever I've negotiated for significant raises. I fought with my CEO when I was CHRO. I got 30% more because I was ready. And the other thing I would say is collect the data before you need it. My advice on networking is the same thing. You want to have that before you need it, because it takes a little bit of time sometimes to get really good data points. You can't just suddenly, have it 2 hours before a meeting. So have that. And then I would explain, how your job has changed, how you've contributed, and then ask what's realistic, and if you get a no, or if you get someone who isn't comfortable with that, just ask them, what would you need to do to get a raise? These are your goals. Where's the gap? Is there a performance gap? Is there a skills gap? Do you need to be taking on more responsibility? Some employees also, particularly less experienced ones, assume that they have to just keep fighting and eventually they'll get more money. And some of them genuinely, again, I'll put my CHRO hat on now, genuinely don't take the time to understand their company's job family structure and whether there are even promotional roles available. You can only have so many VPs, and this comes up a lot, and assistant general counsels. This comes up a lot in GC. There are plenty of companies that have one general counsel and maybe don't want to have a lot in the middle. And that is a very tough decision for colleagues and friends of mine. And even I think I was at that point at one point where you have to decide, gosh, I love this company, but I'm never going to get promoted because the general counsel's well loved and they're only 45 years old and the board loves them. And, I'm probably going to have to leave. And so that's when you have to think through that and that's why I think it's a conversation, because realistically, your manager could say, you're great, like you're amazing, but you're now at the top of your level and there's no other place to like promote you. And we don't want you to go. And yet there isn't really another upward opportunity for you. Those are very tough decisions, but I had very senior people on some of my teams where they maxed out in their salary range. And then I had to accept, some managers unfortunately don't feel comfortable having really transparent conversations like the one I just described with you. They're not coached well by HR, or HR's system is opaque. Maybe they don't have good job families. Maybe they don't communicate well about pay ranges and where they pay to market. Most companies have a philosophy around where they are going to pay to market. For some companies that are kind of old industry companies that are very stable and give good benefits, their target is 50%, at a midpoint, meaning they pay kind of average for their industry. They're not looking to be the most cutting edge company. And so it's helpful to think about what information can you get about your company's pay philosophy, because that's going to really inform what your strategy needs to be and whether it's a good fit for you long term. Whether you like the trade-offs of potentially what their comp and benefits philosophy is.
Tom, I'd love to jump in with a slightly different perspective, not in terms of the substance of how Amii answered, but more thinking about kind of my own journey and something I've seen actually over the last few years, which is one, I think the data is invaluable. And rather than for folks who are in-house, I'm thinking more about folks who are looking to go to a new company and go to a new role. And what I can share is that even smaller companies, there's a variety of what organizations think the roles are worth versus what they're capable to pay versus how they've matured on compensation and what they're looking for in the role. And I think it becomes a data point for anyone to know, like, well, what is this role worth? I think there's also then, what am I willing to accept? And if it's something less than what the market is, well, why did I get there? And be able to have those conversations with your potential employers. And I think about sort of a couple of small startups that I've spoken to over the years where, you know, they did have a budget and their budget was really not reflecting market. And I had great conversations with them, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't, I wasn't ready to make that jump for the compensation that they're offering. Think about like how anyone who's in that position looking for a new role, think about how you would respond to that, because it's not unbelievable that you will come across companies that haven't thought out their pay scale, haven't marked it to market. And it doesn't mean it isn't the right opportunity. It's a question, is it the right opportunity for you? And then I also say, don't be shy to negotiate and be creative on the negotiation. And what I mean by that is, it's not always about comp. There is the equity side. There is working remote, though that's kind of everybody right now. Like, have a bit of flexibility in what's important to you and your family and your loved ones as you think about that next role.
Great points.
On that point, Ken, I just want to jump off from it. Do you, Amii and Ken, see us going into a situation, at least some companies going into a situation where I could apply for an in-house counsel position at Box, even though I live in Massachusetts? I mean, do you see that the borders are going to start to diminish because so many companies may decide to go more remote on a more regular basis? And any thoughts you have on that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So not an hour goes by, but more realistically, not a day goes by where in some form I don't touch this conversation, whether it's personal with friends, colleagues, in the professional scheme. And, you know, I think the answer is yes, no. And what I mean by that is, I think there are organizations, and there's a lot of data points around this now, who have made the decision that they're going to go to a fully distributed model, and that will open up opportunities for folks who haven't been in that geo. I think there's other organizations that are struggling with that decision, and I think legal tends to be one of the laggard domains where there is this sense of, well, like, I still want my headquarters is an A city. I kind of still want most of my legal team to be there because I'm not ready to make that jump to distributed. So I think it's going to come from a company by company basis. I do think for folks who are not in geos that are, where those roles have previously existed, I think one of the recommendations I would have is think really clearly about the in-house role that you're applying for and making sure you check off all of those boxes of domain expertise, because they may not, and I'm making this up here, they may not be used to that construction attorney from Iowa City applying to the cloud content company, but thread that for them, right? Like there could be a lot of reasons why you're a good fit for that, but that's going to be different because they may say like, well, this person's been in the Bay Area. We're going to have a certain sort of understanding of, they understand how a large enterprise tech company works.
Great. Yeah, I think that some companies say they're going to be fully distributed, and I think it's a reaction and a way to make up some of the P&L loss, frankly, on the real estate for a short period. But I have a feeling that most companies will go back to some degree to the old model. What I think we'll see is more openness to flexibility. You might come in for 2 days. And I think certain industries like tech are much more open to this. But a lot of, front-facing or relationship-based organizations are going to want their people to be in, and it is easier to influence the C-suite in person and to be at a headquarters. You just can't really get around that. So I think that some of it is reactive, and there will be some more flexibility, but I don't think we're gonna go fully back to the way we were. but I don't think it's going to be some brand new world where we are location independent across the board.
And I think that layer on that, I think for those organizations which have remote roles or in a hybrid environment where there's still C-suites who are in one headquarters or geolocation, like all of these tools that we've been sort of harping on or sort of pulling back to, which is understanding where kind of your strengths are, what's your business model, who are your influencers and how are you connecting with them. Anyone who finds themselves in a hybrid environment in a legal role where they're not in that HQ, they're going to have to kind of layer on tools to really focus on that, because having that serendipity of those conversations, having that influence with those strategic, those individuals who are driving the strategic direction of the organization, it's going to fall on more on you as the distributor employee to kind of solve how you're going to get that face time, that thought time.
Perfect. Well, Ken, I would love to take the time that we have to answer any specific questions that our colleagues have on the phone. I know we've shared a lot of thoughts that I hope were helpful to everyone, but just to make sure that everybody walks away with something that they need. Amy, if you could help us, if anyone wants to raise their hand or if you want to put it in the chat box, either way is fine. Current career challenges, thoughts.
Part of this is that, you know, we are all Tufts alumni. So even if you want to introduce yourself so we get to know you, tell us where you are, what you're doing. We'd love to get to know you a little bit.
Yay, Adam. Okay.
All right, so Adam Phillip, I run a law firm in Seattle called Aon Law. We do high-tech intellectual property law. We're blessed because we are patent attorneys. That means we're licensed nationally.
Yeah.
So I have expanded our marketing to much more to a national level. But also on the hiring, we've started hiring not attorneys, but senior staff around the country. We have culture is very important, particularly amongst the attorneys. And I hire unicorns. I need engineers who thought there weren't any good opportunities in electrical engineering on the West Coast. And so that it would be a good idea to go deeply in debt to go to law school. And I need the ones that went to engineering school because they were great writers. So I really care about the culture that is created around my patent attorneys. And but they want good support and they really don't care where the paralegal is that is going to be helping them with that. And I will say that maintaining that culture in the age of Zoom has been very important for us.
What's one thing that you've done, Adam, to keep your culture going?
I would say our weekly game lunches. Yeah. So we have hired multiple game designers, independent game designers, who will host an hour to hour and a half long game session for the team everywhere.
I'd love to get their name, actually. If you could put it in the chat, that'd be really cool.
I'm very good at hiring people who are smarter and better organized than myself. So I don't own that knowledge now.
Okay.
But I can follow up with that.
Thank you.
And the most important thing that has done is it's humanized our team members. It's taken them out of the role that they're assigned within the company, so that when somebody is interacting, okay, that paralegal, that's the one who has, encyclopedic knowledge of 1980s pop culture, or that one is the Lord of the Rings geek, yeah. Or that was the one with, 4 cats interrupting the Zoom meeting, and, better not talk about trials and tribulations of puppies, instead just send adorable cat pictures. So breaking people out of a task-oriented relationship has been the point of that.
I'm hearing that you flattened the hierarchy, which is really nice. That's smart.
Adam, out of curiosity, do your teams use sort of more traditional like tech communication devices? Are they Slack? Do you use Slack at all, or any of those other Microsoft Teams?
I cannot pry Slack out of my team's hands. So we switched from individual offices to very cool community offices. So my lawyers have our two main lawyer offices are the two nicest corner offices in Seattle. I mean, this is basically the view that they have. One is on one side of the building, one is on the other side. But one of the things that if you're working in a team environment like that is interruption is a real problem. People feel that if somebody's sitting next to you, you can just go over and interrupt them. We want the collaboration, but we don't want the interruption. So we use Slack as a way to explicitly say, here's a quick message, respond when you have the moment. And so it's not in
nature.
Asynchronous. I don't need to knock you out of flow to, get my response, but please have a casual response back when you can. If it's something we want to preserve, memorialize, send an email, and we'll have that chain of communications. But Slack is there for this is what I'm thinking right now, respond when you have a chance.
Yeah, I think that's become a standard through a lot of different organizations. And I'm just curious because I haven't heard many. To be frank, I haven't had a ton of conversations, but a number of the other law firms I've spoken to, they weren't sort of on that same journey yet.
Well, so we had a catastrophic in-office server fail about 7 years ago, and moved everything into the cloud immediately after that. So
music to my ears.
When COVID hit, everyone just picked up their laptops and switched to the desk at home, and everything kept running for us.
Right.
I was going to say one other thing. But we value Zoom quite a bit. Zoom is integrated into Slack. So if people are going back and forth and it reaches sort of a dialogue level, we'll just hit /Zoom and pop up a Zoom meeting and get it resolved. Like once you start having a conversation, Slack is not the place to do it. Do it face to face. Get more of expressive communication. Make sure that reduce the miscommunication aspects that can happen in just a bare messaging service.
That's important. Great. Well, thank you, Adam.
Happy to.
What about others on the call? Marissa, Catherine, Chris, I see Kayla, Michael, Jenny, looking to see. Danielle. Would love to hear from you guys. Wow. Hey, Chris.
Hi. I'll just say hi. Thanks so much for doing the panel. It's been great to hear and a lot of really interesting stuff.
Chris is our immediate past president of the TLA.
Oh, great. Nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah.
Where are you
Great
based,
network,
Chris?
too. I'm here in Boston. I'm actually in the office today.
Okay.
Trying to get some stuff done. It believe it or not, it is more conducive to productivity than sitting at home, despite the home setup now being the best.
I leave and sometimes go out to sometimes closed cafes with my tea just to get out, and I get more done because my two teenagers aren't here to ask me questions that they should be able to answer themselves at this point.
Well, thank you, Chris. We are winding up at 6. Ken, Amy, you want to have any parting remarks?
Gosh, thank you. I had some resources. Amy, if you want to share that screen, if people have other career questions, I publish a bunch of stuff for free on my website. Everything from the Harvard Business Review articles and Fast Company to special things from ACC and Compliance Week that are very specific to in-house counsel and attorneys. And And then I also have the Promotability Index, which is a really great self-assessment leadership tool. It's been super popular. It's free. It basically breaks down leadership into 5 categories and gives you all kinds of ideas on what you can do. I'm actually creating a workbook companion piece to launch next year, probably first quarter, based on requests from clients on that. And feel free to reach out to me as well. I would say that just for all attorneys, I hope everyone's feeling safe and secure and happy in their roles. But if you're not, again, I have tremendous optimism. I think we're very fortunate to be attorneys and to have had a liberal arts background, like Ken said, that really equips us very well to be adaptable. And I think that adaptability is really the name of the game. It always was, but with VUCA and with the acceleration of change, adaptability and those skills and ability to think cross-functionally and to be really strategic about your career are even more in demand than ever. And attorneys, particularly with those of us who are fortunate enough to go to Tufts, are really in a pole position. And I'm really grateful for that. And so I wouldn't want anyone to ever feel discouraged about their opportunities.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks TLA for encouraging and sponsoring this program, and for anyone who'd like to follow up on sort of anything I've mentioned here, or would like just have any feedback, you get very easy to reach me. I'm ken@box.com. Can't make an email much easier.
An awesome, simple. Yeah, I love it.
That's perfect.
Great.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Ken. Thank you, Amy McDonald. On behalf of TLA, we encourage you to join us with on social media. It's at Tufts Lawyers, and we have a company page on LinkedIn and a group page with over 1,000 members. So be safe, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and thank you for participating. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ken. Thanks,
Bye.
Amy.
Thank
Bye.
you.